Marijuana History 101, or should I say extremely brief Marijuana History 101. It's big, complicated, and we'll only be able to scratch the surface. So let's get started. The first thing that strikes one as odd when looking at the history of marijuana, which is also known as cannabis, is how very much legal it once was. In fact, it wasn't only legal, it just happened to be one of the largest agricultural crops in the world, including the United States. You see, cannabis can also be hemp. And just what is hemp? Well, it's by and large the most robust, durable, natural soft fiber on the face of this planet. Up until 1883, and for thousands of years before, cannabis hemp was the largest agricultural crop in the world. It had thousands of uses and products. The majority of fabric, lighting oil, medicines, paper, and fiber came from hemp. The first marijuana law to exist in the United States was a law ordering farmers to grow hemp. Benjamin Franklin used it to start one of America's first paper mills. The first two copies of the Declaration of Independence were written on cannabis hemp paper. Up until the 1800s, most of the textiles in the United States were made with hemp. 50% of medicine marketed in the last half of the 19th century was made from cannabis. Even Queen Victoria used the resin extracts from cannabis to alleviate her menstrual cramps. But the funny thing about industrial hemp was you couldn't get high from it. Yet, it was lumped in with the following, which also made little sense. Reefer madness. In the early 20th century, yellow journalism had surfaced. Articles depicted blacks and Mexicans as frenzied beasts who would smoke marijuana, play devil's music, and heap disrespect and viciousness on the readership, a majority of which happened to be white. Some offenses included looking at a white woman twice, laughing at a white person, or even stepping on white men's shadows. And this ended up leading to a law in the form of a tax stamp. A tax stamp that would not only include marijuana, but also hemp and cannabis medicines. It's speculated that hemp's potential for an abundance of new products was going to be in direct competition with other sources. And this, added to the reefer madness, led to the eventual downfall of all forms of cannabis. Popular Mechanics magazine had actually prepared an article entitled New Billion-Dollar Crop. Hemp was touted as being able to produce more than 5,000 textile products from its thread-like fiber and more than 25,000 products from its cellulose, ranging from dynamite to cellophane. Its superiority as a source for paper was also becoming known, especially with the development of hemp processing equipment. Now, the new Marijuana Tax Act was all fine and dandy, except for one thing. If you wanted to grow hemp, you needed to buy a stamp, but they weren't giving any out to anybody. And so, in effect, all forms of cannabis became illegal. Things pretty much stayed that way until World War II, when the government decided that hemp once again was a good thing and produced a video, Hemp for Victory. But by the time the war was over, hemp again became bad. And in 1948, when the marijuana law once again came into question, Congress recognized that marijuana was made illegal for the wrong reason. It didn't make people violent at all. It made them pacifists. The communists would use it to weaken America's will to fight. Congress now voted to keep marijuana illegal for the exact opposite reason they had outlawed it in the first place. And all through the years, report after report, commissioned by everybody, from the mayor of New York to the president of the United States, has come back with the view that marijuana should have no criminal penalty attached to it. Yet, marijuana remains as illegal today as it did nearly 70 years ago.
Marijuana. It's become big business. A multi-billion-dollar business, both in Canada and the United States. But why has it become such a big business? Here in British Columbia alone, it's speculated that the illegal BC marijuana trade brings in upwards of $7 billion annually. And up to 85% of that product heads south to the United States. Having become an international issue, when do the lines blur? How does a massive underground market like this survive while remaining illegal? Why is marijuana illegal in the first place? And if prohibition is meant to protect us, I guess the most obvious question is, does the prohibition work?
If prohibition worked, okay, if you could just wave a magic wand and say, this has gone away, I'd be all over it, you know. But the fact of the matter is that prohibition has never worked.
You know, we've been here before. You remember the first prohibition, right? Which was?
Prohibition of alcohol.
No, I'm talking about the first prohibition. Thou shalt not partake of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And who was the big cop? And how many people did he have to watch? 2.
What are the goals of this prohibition?
I assume the goals of prohibition are to reduce the amount of drugs available and to reduce the demand for those drugs. In both instances, cannabis prohibition's an utter failure.
Has the prohibition stopped people from using marijuana?
You get a phone call and says, I'm from the federal government. I want to know whether you've been using cocaine or marijuana recently. Presumably you might be getting a little bit of an underestimate.
In 1937, there were estimated to be 55,000 marijuana users. And now there are estimated to be more than 50 million of them. That's a 100,000% increase.
Seems to be quite a few of them.
Yes, I'm afraid there are.
Whether the drug is criminalized or decriminalized does not affect the rates of smoking of cannabis, either uptake or of discontinuation.
So what are the dangers of using marijuana?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Gives you like a rapid heartbeat.
Smoker's cough.
I'm sure it has some effect on your brain function, memory.
I don't know, is there something unhealthy about moving slowly?
It's not good for you.
You're not fully conscientious of what you're doing.
Thickens some membranes in your brain or something.
Well, it's been science. I guess I'm being told it's been scientifically proven that marijuana kills your brain cells.
That's the one I remember. Marijuana kills brain cells.
I thought the same thing. You know, I didn't start smoking pot until about 5 years ago. I thought pot made you stupid. You know, I bought into it just as much as anybody did. I realized when I was like 30 years old that I was tricked. I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
1974, the Heath Tulin study. Ronald Reagan announces, the most reliable scientific sources say permanent brain damage is one of the inevitable results of the use of marijuana. Monkeys pumped full of marijuana, apparently 30 joints a day, had begun to atrophy and die after 90 days. Brain damage was determined after counting the dead brain cells of both monkeys who had been subjected to the marijuana and ones who had not. This study became the foundation of the government, and other special interest groups claim that marijuana kills brain cells. Here's what they didn't tell you. After 6 years of requests, how the study was conducted was finally revealed. Instead of administering 30 joints a day for 1 year, Dr. Heath used a method of pumping 63 Colombian-strength joints through a gas mask within 5 minutes over 3 months.
They suffocated the monkeys. What they did is they put these gas masks basically on their face and they pumped pot into it, but without additional oxygen. So after X amount of time, the brain shut down. Well, if you suffocate, the first thing that's going to happen is your brain cells are going to die with lack of oxygen. So what they did is they suffocated the monkey, showed all these dead brain cells, and then went on to associate it by saying that cannabis use causes your brain cells to die. And how many people, not knowing the origin of the study, have gone on to quote it and re-quote it. And now people believe it.
Studies since have shown no signs of any brain cell damage. In 2005, new research suggested that marijuana could possibly stimulate brain cell growth. That study hasn't received the same attention. Another common belief? Marijuana causes lung cancer.
In the 1999 study by the Institute of Medicine that was paid for by the United States government, they had to use words like may and should cause cancer.
We've been hearing for years them trying to say that it causes lung cancer, and we say, really, that's interesting because you can't even show us one case of cancer being caused by cannabis use alone.
You definitely have to do it moderately because